Welcome. This is Miles Free, and I'm joined by Omar Nashashibi, partner at the Franklin Partnership, PMPA's retained representatives in Washington, D.C. I've asked Omar to join us today to discuss some of the things that could impact your shops in September. Omar, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Miles, though I might not have a lot of good news to deliver.
I'm not expecting good news. That's why I gave you the call. There are several major laws that many of us take for granted that I believe are slated to expire September 30th. Can you tell us about them? Will our crops continue to grow? Will our needy people still be fed? Will the planes stop flying? What happens on midnight, September 30th? And is it going to be all right? Or is it Cinderella and pumpkins for all of us?
Well, the pumpkins would be a little bit early for Halloween, so let's hope not. But that's where it's looking. The way Congress works is you have two sides of the ledger. You either create appropriations, that's where you provide actual hard dollars for programs, or you create policy. The dollars typically will expire every year or have to be renewed every so often, and that's the federal government funding side. But there's a lot of policy deadlines that come up. There's some bills that are authorized for 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. And that means Congress is facing a number of deadlines. You mentioned September 30th, Federal Aviation Administration bill. That authorization meaning that would renew and update laws dealing with the FAA and guidelines. I was delayed in O'Hare last night. Not a pleasant thing to get to the house around 1 a.m. But these are the kinds of laws and the policies that if Congress doesn't update, we're still stuck with the old. You have a farm bill that will not meet the September 30th deadline. If you're an agribusiness, that means quite a bit, especially on the subsidy side. That's looking like December, possibly a pandemic. And All Hazardous Preparedness Act, we're seeing new waves of COVID coming up, where that renewal is lapsing. Food stamps also lapsing on September 30th. The list keeps going. And we just saw the devastation that's happening in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Well, the National Flood Insurance Program that guarantees from the federal government also expires on September 30th. And for our defense contractors, keep in mind the National Defense Authorization Act has been passed by Congress every single year since 1961. They're supposed to do it by September, sometime in the fall. That also looks to be delayed. So, Miles, we've got a lot going on September 30th. And right now, these next 30 days are going to have a lot of chaos and uncertainty for manufacturers.
But Omar, that's child's play compared to the real deadline on September 30th. The federal government runs out of money. Are we headed for a government shutdown? What does this mean to our member companies? There's procrastination, and then there's just blowing through deadlines. And I have to tell you, I think that's a prerequisite to be in Congress these days. Just ignore the deadline. So, what's up with funding?
Well, right. My work product, I might have done it at 1 a.m, but at least I turned it in before class that day. With Congress, they can just extend deadlines on their own. And really, those that have to pay are those that are using those programs, are the recipients of the uncertainty there. Yeah, we have a federal government shutdown potentially on the way. There's a good number of people in town right now that are preparing for, if we don't have something done by September 30th, then the government will shut down. There's a number of folks in a certain flank of a party that are looking forward to that in some ways because it helps them reassert some authority over the process. Right now, what you need to do is Congress has to pass all 12 of their federal funding bills. They're referred
12,
to as
12 funding bills.
12. And you know how many they've passed right now, Miles, right? A whole lot of zeros. And the Senate committees have moved all 12 of their bills through the Senate Appropriations Committee. That's finished. Majority Leader Schumer on Wednesday of this week came out and said he's going to put several, about 3 or 4 of them on the floor and move them through the Senate in September. The House is stuck. They normally by this time would have passed all of their legislation, but there's an infighting within the Republican Party on spending levels. And right now, the best we can hope for is a continuing resolution. A continuing resolution keeps the government funding on temporary measures from previous year's funding. And I'm hearing they're going to try to get one into the second week of December around Thanksgiving. But even that's not a sure thing. It's going to be a big mess. And I think you're going to see the markets go crazy. You're going to see anybody that's relying on government funding for programs, projects, which is the vast majority of everybody, are going to face a lot of challenges here. The politics aren't aligning, and people are hardening the stance going into September 30th.
Well, compromise has never been a strength in DC, but correct me if I'm wrong. aren't there some mandatory rollbacks if they do shut down and it goes into December?
So here's the tricky thing that Congress did for itself. In order to help staunch the procrastination bleeding that is the Capitol, they put a deadline that said if by January 1st of 2024, they had not passed all 12 of their government bills, then there would be, I believe, a 1.1% across the board cut. Now, the tricky thing is the language that doesn't actually take effect on January 1. It doesn't take effect until April 30th. So what Congress did is they made everybody believe in the media and elsewhere that the real deadline was, oh yeah, we'll get this done by New Year's. No, 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 no. The actual language says the haircuts don't go into effect until May 1st, which gives them, guess what? 4 more months to procrastinate.
That's a pretty pretty good copay on procrastination.
Yeah, pretty good backdoor they snuck in there where most people weren't paying attention that don't do this for a living.
So, you've just filled us with cheer and good news. What else should our members know about what's coming this month on Capitol Hill? Certainly a full agenda with those 12 bills, but also a lot of uncertainty.
There is. And the reason I went through some of the details and the timeline on a potential federal funding bill by the end of the year, we do think that if they do get this continuing resolution, they'll buy enough time, they'll create probably a series of 3 or 4 mini bills. We call them omnibus mini buses, and they will take those 12 appropriations bills, divide them up, and then start passing them in blocks. That's the idea. Now, on one of those blocks, these are what we call must-pass vehicles. As I said, the government will shut down 1 or more agencies if you don't pass all 12. So from the taxes side, this is our opportunity as PMPA to get a fix on the research and development expensing issue. As most of you all are aware, that starting January 1 of 2022, you can no longer fully expense your R&D activities. You have to capitalize them and amortize them over 5 years, basically make them an asset that you're paying taxes on. Our members are telling us that it's $250,300,000 additional tax liability based on their 22 activities. That's a real hit. That took effect again a year and a half ago now, and we've had a seat at the table. I was in the whip's office in July. We were with the chairman of the tax writing committee in the House, talking about how we're going to get something done. And right now, it looks like that'll be the best chance to get this reversed. And if we're successful, it would be retroactive to January 1 of 2022. And that would give our members a lot of relief. That's $250,000. That's $350,000 right there back in their pockets that they can invest in capital and invest in their people. That's one of the things.
And they already have, but this is just more to reinvest. So bonus depreciation, what's going on there?
That's the other big one that our members in our annual surveys always comes back. 100% expensing, that dropped to 80% on January 1 of 2023. That was another change similar to the R&D that was included in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So we've got a dual mission right now. We're going to try to make everybody whole on 100% depreciation. It's down at 80%. It's going to drop to 60% on January 1 of 24 in just a few months. So folks, if you're not confident Congress will get their job done, buy it, place it in the service, and get it going. You'll at least get 80 cents on the dollar instead of dropping to 60 on January 1. So Miles, we've got a busy September trying to lay the groundwork for many things that might end up coming up in December, and they're going to be cutting it close right up to Christmas, unfortunately, like usual.
The thing that I like working with you, Omar, is you always understate the busyness. We haven't even brushed the surface on regulations. And every August, Congress leaves Washington with their summer break, but the administrative agencies, they don't go on summer break. They issue new proposals, new regulations, and they've been pretty busy. So why don't you tell us what has just happened in August and what we can expect in the next few months from our pals in OSHA and the Department of Labor?
The regulators are great about this. They love issuing major rules and regulations the week before Labor Day, the week of Thanksgiving, and the week between Christmas and New Year's. It's regular. I've been in this town for 25 years now, and they do it every year. And the surprises we got in August were somewhat expected. Let's just start with one of them, and that deals with the overtime rule. We've got right now, just literally this week before Labor Day weekend, the Department of Labor came out and increased their exemption threshold for those eligible for time and a half based on a 40-hour work week, adding 3.6 million more people that are eligible. Currently, the time and a half for executive, administrative, professional, clerical, your EAPs that are meeting that test, they are currently set at 35,568. So if you're earning at or below that, you're eligible for time and a half. The Biden administration is looking to increase that threshold from 35,000 to $55,068 on an annual salaried basis, and they also break it down by weekly. So again, 3.6 million more Americans that would be eligible for overtime, but from a business standpoint, that's a lot of cost. You might be looking at a number of additional FTEs in your shops that would be now eligible for time and a half. And one more, there's the highly compensated category. They're going to increase that threshold from 107,000 to over 140,000. Meaning time and a half on those, your controllers, others like that. That's very, very significant type of pay that you're looking at. And the real kicker here, Miles, they give you a 60-day comment period, but also the rule takes effect in 60 days. So it's being published. We just saw it today as we're recording this. They did a pre-publication. So pretty much from Labor Day weekend, this is time and a half rule is going to take effect, it looks like, before Thanksgiving.
That's a 40, almost 50% increase.
It is a 50% increase, absolutely, with 2 months' notice.
And by the way, we don't need your stinking comments because the rule goes into effect whatever you tell us. Wow.
And
we're
it's
getting
gonna,
the government we pay for.
yeah, and they're indexing it, the rule, so it would increase every 3 years by the 35 percentile of the lowest annualized salary, which will be in the southern region of the U.S. And so they've already built in inflation adjustments in this as well. So
well, thankfully, this is the only one that we're worried about, right, Omar?
No, of course, that's just one. The big one, and this just started August 25th. We officially have a small business review panel. Department of Labor is starting the review of their proposed indoor and outdoor heat rule. That's when the heat index exceeds 80 degrees Fahrenheit. OSHA is proposing including a number of mandates on employers that would include rest breaks every 2 hours, access to cold water, a set-aside cooling station, it could be a break room, and then a number of other PPE, engineering, administrative controls in order to reduce the temperature to either at 80 degrees Fahrenheit or put in a number of these protections. The OSHA is saying that they want companies to come up with their own customized plan to meet their needs based on a number of different input criteria that they can use from the potential model that OSHA puts out. If you think about this, Miles, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, think about when you were working back in the 70s. There's nothing in a steel mill that was going to get you down to 80-degree heat index. And our members across the country, whether you're in New Hampshire in a 120-year-old building or you're in Texas, it's going to be hot out there. And it's going to be very difficult and expensive for our members to start complying with this proposed rule that we may see in the winter to take effect next summer.
Omar, the thing that scares me about this is I could see if it was tailored for the different occupational situations, but what if this criteria is one size fits all, and so it applies to the guys that are working on the roof? What if it applies to the guys on landscape? And we're held to the same thing with our indoor facilities where we do have amenities.
Right, and you have to look in some areas, you're going to be doing continuous monitoring. And so you're not just going to be checking the temperature in the quality control room that is always crisp, clean, and cool. You're going to have to go throughout and even near a machine because that's obviously where an employee is, where the operator is located. And these are factors that are certainly going to be of consideration. And you're going to have the supervisor on the floor watching the clock, coordinating with the HR professional, and now managing additional breaks in between, depending on by how much. And if you've got a loading dock, that's another issue. So, Miles, this one has a lot of complications. This is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. California is finalizing its indoor rule right now. That'll take effect next May. You already have a few other states, but OSHA is moving forward with this very, very quickly. We would not be surprised to see something this winter.
Omar, that's enough good news for regulatory. Let's move on. There's another major deadline this month that has the potential to cause significant disruption to our shops. That deadline is September 14th. What can you tell us about a potential strike with the UAW? What are you hearing on Capitol Hill? What are your sources in Washington and your other manufacturers telling you?
Yes, this is just based on what we're picking up here in Washington, D.C. It does sound like we're heading for a UAW strike on September 14th. Rumors are it'll start with Stellantis. A lot of that's because Sean Fain, the current head of the UAW, used to work for them on that employee representative side, and Stellantis had some other issues, so they'll likely start there and then potentially expand to all across. There's a number of demands that they're making. Obviously, some of them, like pensions, those are non-starter, bringing those back after what happened in 08, 09. But then there's also a big focus on temporary workers, the ability to get up to a higher wage more quickly than the 4-year limits, maybe starting to get up to the top wage after 1 year, for example. Unions want less. That's likely not going to happen. But there's a lot of issues and concerns. The temp workers, a lot of this also comes down to the electric vehicle operations and the joint ventures that the big three have that the unions aren't really seeing a strong piece of. And those negotiations are heading, they have Joe Biden in the White House. You have not had a more pro-union president for a century. And the union understands that, and they realize this is their best chance, and they have the greatest leverage. And I'll defer to you on the disruptions this could cause among our members. But we do believe we are heading for a shutdown starting on September 14th. Some have told me it'll last at least 45 days was the plan on the Stellantis side, and that could cause some additional disruptions. And you saw we already had some in automotive in July.
Well, 45 days would be, I remember the steel strike in 59, and I had no ice cream as a little kid all summer. It was over 100 days. So I'm hoping it's 45 days, but certainly impact. That's our largest market served. Omar, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience as we close up?
Just start planning. Government impacts every aspect of your business, whether you like it or not. You have to be aware that these regulations are going to have an impact on your shop. The taxes, the holes that they created for you, if we don't get that fixed, that's going to be taken away from 2024 investment. So everything the government does, good or bad, we need to be able to make sure our members are getting that real-time information from a source they can trust. And that's hopefully what we try to do here today.
Omar, thank you for taking time today to share with us the sunny outlook for September. Thanks again.
Thank you.